Although I no longer believe in Islam, I am of course aware that there are many different interpretations. There are moderate interpretations, non-literal interpretations, Sufi interpretations, and modernist interpretations. In fact, there are innumerable personal interpretations that vary from Muslim to Muslim. It has, however, become the fashion for far-right nationalists, Christian fundamentalists, and other bigoted groups to insist that true Islam is the Islam of the extremists and the fanatics and the terrorists, and to equate Islam with fascism. They want to convince everyone, including Muslims themselves, that moderate forms of Islam are wrong, and that Muslims who appear moderate are either ignorant or practicing taqiyya, hiding their true intentions. It's funny, but I rarely heard that word during all the years I was a Muslim, yet since reading the rants of these bigots, one would think it was a fundamental pillar of the faith. The reason these extreme bigots do this is because they need to justify their war on Islam. When they insist that Islam is a fascist ideology and that all true Muslims are Nazis, they are trying to force people to agree that Islam must be destroyed and Muslims wiped out. Sadly, they have already managed to convince some far-right racists who were just itching for an excuse to justify violence against innocent Muslim immigrants. However, these people are wrong. True Islam is not the Islam of the extremists. In fact, there is no such thing as true Islam. Of course, every group within Islam will claim that they follow true Islam and that the other groups are wrong, but the fact is that Islam is made up of many traditions, mystical traditions as well as literalist, moderate traditions as well as hardline. The claim that true Islam is the Islam of the terrorists or that it is a fascist ideology is not only completely false, it is also a dangerous belief as it incites hatred towards ordinary Muslims. I applaud the fact that Maryam Namazi, head of the Council of Ex-Muslims, is at pains to make the distinction between the Islam of the ordinary and peaceful Muslim and the political Islam of the Islamists. It is this harsh and brutal version of Islam that seeks to impose itself on the world that needs to be confronted, not the Islam of the vast majority of peaceful and moderate Muslims. It is extremism that is the enemy, and extremism can use many pretexts. It is true that Islam has a very long way to go before it can truly say that the extremists amongst them have been defeated ideologically, but they certainly don't have a monopoly on extremists, and sadly there will always be a minority of human beings who will use whatever religion, belief or political ideology to carry out acts of violence and murder against innocent people. I know some will argue that Islam is unique because it is particularly resistant to change and reinterpretation. I agree that reinterpreting God's eternal word poses a unique difficulty for Muslims, but it is certainly not impossible. And we shouldn't forget that man has an amazing capacity for believing the absurd and for selective vision. I was reminded of this when I heard the Pope linking Islam and violence and then saying that violence is incompatible with the nature of God. I can only think that the Pope hasn't read the Bible, because anyone who has cannot come to any other conclusion other than violence is an intrinsic part of the nature of God. But actually, I take my hat off to the Christians, because they have indeed moved so far away from the teachings of the Middle Ages that you could almost say it's a different religion. And if Christians can turn things around to such an extent, I don't see why Muslims can't do the same. In fact, they are already starting to do so. And for example, you will find many Muslims now believe that the Quran doesn't say that one is allowed to hit a rebellious wife, but that it really says, leave them alone. Personally, I find such interpretations absurd, but I don't have a problem with people believing absurd things. I only have a problem with people believing violent things and trying to impose it on everyone. Although, without doubt, political Islam is a huge problem in our day and age, it would be a grave mistake, let alone a dangerous one, to paint the whole of Islam with one brush.